Welcome to the latest online education program brought to you by the Stanley County Historical Society. I'm Kent Harkey, President of the Historical Society, and this month we bring you Marking Time, a chronological order of the Freeman-Marks house. This house is a little hidden gem in our neighborhood. It's the oldest surviving house in Almond and was listed in the National Register of Historic Places by the Department of the U.S. Interior in 1995. Our guest today will share its history and how this federal-style cottage was rescued and preserved nearly 50 years ago. Joining me is Janice Mitchener, our lead docent from the Historical Society, board member David Almond, and board member and chairman of our current financial endowment campaign, Dr. J.C. Boone. Janice, we'll start with you. Tell us about your responsibilities as a docent and why you feel so connected to the Freeman-Marks house.
Well, the docents represent the Stanley County Historical Society. We are the voice when we lead tours for the public to share the history of the homes. What it's like to work and live in the 1850s. These tours are given to the public upon request, including school tours, and all ages can be included. The Marks house is the oldest home in Albemarle, and very little has been changed in the original since it was built. We have some original pieces from the Marks family. The front two rooms retain all of the original woodwork. We even have a quilt that's 170 years old. So as a docent, we tell this and explain this to the people as they tour the homes, and hopefully they will see and appreciate how old it is. The connection I feel to this house is because of my love of Stanley County history, and also two of my great aunts actually lived in this house. Also, another aunt was a personal friend of Patty Marks and was instrumental in encouraging her to give the house to the county. So this is when I go to the house, I kind of feel their presence.
Great, great. Now, David and Dr. Boone, you were both members of our predecessor organization, the Stanley County Historical Preservation, or earlier was even the
Historic Properties Commission.
Historic Properties Commission, which was a local government authority when this restoration project originated. Tell us what you recall about your early involvement and who those visionaries were in that group. And since you were a charter member, or one of the very first members of that, David, we'll start with you.
Well, I would say three people probably primarily were the real driving for it, or maybe about four. One, her aunt she mentioned, Mrs. Elmina Surratt. Dr. Davis Fort was the chairman of the county commissioners at the time, and he was, I think, pretty much the driving force with the county to establish the Historic Properties Commission. And I'd have to also mention a lady named Catherine Pickler from up in New London. She was extremely knowledgeable on Stanley County history and really wanted to see the Historic Properties Commission formed. And not trying to leave anybody out, but J.C. Holbrook, who was, as a lot of people would remember, was a well-known building contractor here in Stanley County. He was extremely interested and influential. And so, not to leave anybody out, there was actually 10 original members of the commission, but I'd have to say probably those four were, you might say, the key people.
Very interesting. What do you recall, Dr. Boone?
Very little.
Very little.
That's too long ago for me. But I remember J.C. Holbrook above all. It seems to me that he was president of our
Chairman.
The chairman, yeah. And he was very excited about what was happening. And I don't know, J.C. named David and I to look after or to work with the architect on the home, which we did. I have more to say about the architect a little later, but all the fundraising had been done by the time I got on the board. I was a Johnny-come-lately. But That's about all I can remember.
Okay, great. Well, the Freeman-Marks house has a complicated owner history, with 8 other owners from 1847 to 1884. But what can you tell us about the families that bear its name? So, who was Daniel Freeman, Janice?
Well, there were actually 10 different owners that called this their home. It was first located on lot number 5, which was right near the courthouse, making it an ideal residence or office for lawyers and doctors at that time. Mr. Freeman was the largest farmer in Stanley County. He had 3,500 acres. He bought 15 town lots in 1847. We were given 51 acres in 1841 when we became the county seat. So then when this happened back in the day, they would divide the acres into lots. So Mr. Freeman bought 15 town lots. He gave land for the Almond City Cemetery, where he is buried. He also gave land for the First Methodist Church and was first postmaster. Some of the most prominent men rented or became owners of the house. Samuel J. Pemberton was an attorney and went on to become a state senator. While living there, he co-authored a reference book, which is still used today, and he wrote it right there in the Marks house. In 1884, it came into possession of Mr. Whitson Marks for $1,000. He came with his wife, Irina, and daughter, Ida. He had an amazingly varied business career. He worked for the government. He owned a carding mill, cotton gin, sawmill, and many other businesses. One was located around the Five Points area. 2 additional daughters were born in the Marks house after they moved there. They were Sally and Patty Marks. Both became noted educators. Sally received her degree at Columbia University and was the first woman professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She worked for the United States government as an education specialist and was decorated by the government of Peru for her contributions to its reading program. She lived many years in Washington before her death in Albemarle in 1967. Patty, meanwhile, studied at Columbia University also and Meredith College. Outside of the 5 years she taught in Oklahoma, her teaching career of some 45 years was spent in North Carolina, where she was a principal of 4 different schools, one being Wingate before it became a college. And Patty was fond of saying that after she left Wingate, they hired a man, so it took a man to take her place. So that's about the people that live there.
Okay. Well, the Freeman-Marks house is perhaps the lesser known of the 2 houses that Historical Society now owns and operates, because it lies in the shadow of the 1852 Isaiah Snuggs house, which faces North 3rd Street. Unlike the Snuggs house, which has always been in that spot, the Freeman-Marks house has been moved a number of different times. Can you share with us the previous locations and the dates that the Marks house was moved?
Well, we think the house was built actually in 1810, 1820, but we don't have any records until 1847 because of the fires and what all went with courthouses in Montgomery County. So we usually say it was about 1847. So the Marks family, of course, owned it the Freemans owned it first, and then the Marks the longest. 1906, Mr. Marks and Thomas Crump Hearn built a brick boarding house on 2nd Street. At that time, the Marks house was moved behind this building, so that was actually the second move. It was one of the most impressive structures in Albemarle, the brick building. The Marks opened it as a boarding house that year. It accommodated up to 20 regular boarders who enjoyed not only lodging and delicious meals, but laundry, mending, counseling, and mothering. It was run primarily by Miss Marks and her eldest daughter, Ida. For the next 30 years, Ida helped run the house. She lived here until her death in 1966. Her mom died in 1929. The house had become a rental property until 1950. It eventually became unrentable in the 1960s. Miss Patty had thought about tearing it down, but she never got around to doing so, thank goodness. After the Historic Properties Commission was formed in 1973, they concluded that the house was determined to be one of the most important pre-Civil War dwellings in Stanley County. It remained here until Miss Patty and her niece donated the property in 1975. Then it was moved to its present location, thus making the third and final move. The property was on one of the original acreage that was part of the 51 acres that was given to Stanley County in 1841. Many outside changes had occurred to the house, though there was much work to be done to restore it to its original appearance. After 10 years it was open to the public. Miss Patty lived to see it restored, and she was 100 years old at that time. To make it a little bit clearer as to the different moves, this is the square, and this was the courthouse, wooden structured courthouse, was right in the middle of 2nd Street and Main Street. So that's why when they, so it was there, and that's why they were able to rent it with so many different people, because it was right next to the courthouse. But then they just moved it down the street. So all of this was the original acreage that was given to the county in 1841. So when we talk about it being moved, none of it was very far away. So the second move was here. And then when it was given to the county in 1975, that's where it was, the final move. Now, even though, excuse me, the Snug House has never been moved, actually the Snug House was moved back a few, 30 feet, I think, from where it was originally. But it was on that original acreage, so therefore the Marks house is on it as well. So even though there were, two different times, this is where it is, and it's back to the way it was when it was first built. Excuse me. This shows you how it looked, excuse me, as it was rental property. So you can see it's pretty bad shape. And excuse me. So then they moved it. When they moved it, that's why it took so long. It took 10 years to get it to where it is now.
After Miss Patty Marks gave the house to the Stanley County Historic Preservation Commission in 1974, the restoration effort began under the direction of the North Carolina Department of Cultural Resources. David, you were quite involved with that, so can you recount your involvement with the fundraising efforts of the HPC and House Bill 182, introduced by then Representative Janet Pickler in the state legislature in 1977. Everybody knows how important funding is to get anything done, so tell us a little bit about what you experienced at that time.
Well, as you say, money is the key, and the bill that you referred to gave Stanley County, or gave the Historic Properties Commission, a $25,000 grant from the state, spread over a 2-year period, 77 to 78, and then 78, 79. The state would give us up to $12,500, assuming we raised that same amount on the local level. And fortunately we did. The Stanley County gave, I may be wrong on the numbers, seemed like Stanley County put in about $5,000 a year, and the city of Albemarle something like $2,500 a year, I think it was. So we still had to raise, I don't know, somewhere around $5,000 to $6,000 a year from strictly private money, which right now sounds like almost nothing. But 45 years ago, roughly, that seemed like a fair amount of money. But we did, and we matched, we got everything we needed, and so we got the full matching grant from the state.
Okay, great. Now, Dr. Boone, you said that by the time you came on in the scene, that the fundraising had already taken place. The restoration commenced in 1979, and the house was dedicated in 1986. So, can you fill us in on what took so long? There's a 7-year span to get the house completed.
The wheels of progress move slowly.
The wheels of progress move slowly.
Yeah. I'd like to mention something about Ham Morton. He and I were very good friends during the grammar school. And he went to North Carolina State, and as a youngster was pretty much spoiled. But J.C. Holbrook, being a part of the Stanley Hardware, his daddy, Ham's daddy, was the manager of the hardware, so there was a good fit there. Ham, when I came aboard, Ham told me we had approximately $50,000 to put toward the house. And I worked very closely with him, as well as David, in trying to make certain that the job was done the way we wanted it done and the way Ham felt like it ought to be done.
Let me interject if I may. Ham was our architect. I don't
Yes.
think you mentioned that.
He was an
He was
architect.
the architect for the project.
Yeah, I forgot to say that. But he worked very hard. We took a lot of pictures, which you have in the Stanley room, heritage room. And in 1977, I became very involved with the Optimists. And because of my involvement with that, and in years later, I really don't know what happened during that period. I don't know why it took so long, other than the wheels of progress moved slowly.
I'm certain they did the exterior improvements and restorations and then proceeded to the interior once those were finished.
Yeah, the exterior, as I recall, was probably finished somewhere around 81, 82. In other words, we were really concerned about getting all our money together and getting it in the dry. And then we're going to worry about the rest later. And so it was after that, after 81, 82 is when the work started to complete the interior. And actually went back to the state. Now, I was off the commission by that time, so I don't know all the details. But it was about out of money, I think, by that time. But some more money was raised locally, as I understand it, and we got another $10,000 grant from the state to finish the inside. So it still took about probably about 4 or 5 years to get the inside completed correctly.
In 1981, I became the governor of North Carolina Optimists. So I was not involved after that. I spent all my time on that job.
That was a full-time job.
Yeah, that plus my work at the college was full-time.
Yes. But David, you had mentioned that the chimneys were destroyed for the Marks house, so we had
Yeah, that was part of the outside project.
the outside project. Tell us who did those chimneys.
Lyles McSwain, very well-known masonry contractor during that period of time. Brother to Ralph McSwain, who was, of course, sheriff during that period of time. And Lyles did, I think, a very good job. But those chimneys, there's nothing original about them. They're all replicas. But I think they're a very good representation of what the originals probably look like.
They're very good representation.
And I understand that there was a kitchen that was built adjacent to the house that was used. But we made the decision not to try to build that kitchen. Is that right, David?
I have no memory of that, so I'll take your word for it.
Well, they wanted the house to be the original
Right.
1847, so anything that was beyond that, they did not want. And there was a kitchen there when it was rental. A
Right.
lot was added. That's what took so long for it to, besides the money, for it to be back to the original house, the way it was.
That makes sense.
Good, good. Well, the Stanley County Historical Society was incorporated as a 501(c) nonprofit organization in 2013, and a merger was completed with the Stanley County Historical Foundation. Since that time, the Historical Society has been a friend organization to the Stanley County History Center by providing financial support to facilitate the transition from the previous museum that was located on East Main Street to make way for the new Pfeiffer Health Science Building and relocating the museum to the North 2nd Street location. And from time to time, we would assist the government financially for continued restoration of both museum houses. Dr. Boone, share with us what occurred last year in 2020 in the organization and what led you to your role as chairman of the Preserving Our Heritage Endowment Financial Campaign. What's the purpose and goal of the current endowment campaign?
Well, it's a long story. The county decided that it wanted to give up the property, and the Historical Society, after much discussion, decided that we would take it if the county wanted to transfer it to us. And that happened. The Historical Society is now responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of the homes. So we had to have some way to finance all of that, but we had not raised that kind of money before. So the board decided that we should go into a campaign to raise money and to do it as quickly as we could. I think the figure was $500,000 to $550,000 that we wanted to raise. My becoming the chairman of the campaign, because we couldn't get anybody else to do it. To be quite honest, we contacted several people that we'd like to have had, and they turned us down. And then I went to Jim, and I said, Jim, why don't we just take care of it? I think we were going to take care of it anyway. And so I became the campaign chairman. And then I fell upon hard times with my health. I have not been able to do much. But Jim has done an outstanding job. You chose the right person for that position. What else do you want to know?
Okay. Well, to date, the Historical Society has attained nearly 55% of that $550,000 goal in gifts and pledges. So as we hope to conclude that campaign at the end of the month, August 30th. So why do you place such importance on this effort?
Well, the longer you work on something, the less enthusiasm becomes. And we wanted to do it as quickly as we could. Now, we've changed the date several times because of COVID-19, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to raise any more money. We will.
We'll continue to receive money, won't we?
Yes. Well, we will be glad to accept any money after that date. But we will celebrate toward the end of the month for the work that we've done and invite a number of people who have been major contributors to come to that celebration. I forgot what the rest of the question was.
That's okay. I think it's quite remarkable, and I'm certainly appreciative that we have you and David who were there at the very beginning raising money to restore that house, which led to the Snokes house, and then today that we're trying to raise $550,000. So y'all really come full circle and been a great leader and someone with a lot of expertise and dedication to history. I know, David, you're a wonderful history buff, so tell us why this campaign is important to you.
Okay. Well, for me personally, I've just simply always been interested in local history. So it's kind of a personal passion. But as far as the community in general is concerned, I think it's important because I don't really understand how a community or how people can really appreciate where they are now if they don't know what's going on before. Good or bad, right or wrong, everybody's got their own interpretation, but you can't really understand what's happened now unless you understand what has preceded. And you can't really, I don't think, get folks to appreciate that just reading a book or studying something online. You need something tangible to look at. And I think that's what this campaign does, is, of course, support the houses that we already have, and maybe we could branch out, add another house or something later on. That obviously remains to be seen. But I just think it's important so people keep a perspective on where they are.
If a person doesn't know where they came from, it's like amnesia. You just don't know.
That's right.
And I've always been interested in history, even as a youngster. But hopefully, this endowment is going to serve the people of Stanley County with educational programs that enhance and illuminate the treasured history and culture of our area. It's going to provide opportunities for the public to attend and utilize historic property resources, including tours, presentations, and special events, which we've been doing about monthly for some time. Of course, the major emphasis is to support the perpetual maintenance and identified capital needs of the Isaiah W. Snuggs House and the Freeman-Marks House, both of which were listed in the National Register of Historic Places by the United States Department of the Interior in 1995. And then lastly, hopefully it would allow us to assist in the potential acquisition of other historic properties, exhibits, or institutions which highlight events central and instrumental to the development and heritage of our county. I think that pretty well covers the purpose of the endowment.
Dr. Boone, thank you. That's a great lead-in to my last question. So the Historical Society raises money to keep these houses open. So how does the Historical Society plan to utilize the houses as far as their programming and that type of thing? Janice, do you want to go first?
Well, right now, we're opening the houses the second Sunday of every month, just for anybody that is walking around Almond and they want to come and see the houses. So when people start talking about it and realizing that we're open and they can come for a tour, they don't have to call about it. They can just walk in. We're going to have people there. And we're going to have all these wonderful activities there, and that will bring more people to see the houses and understand. We have people come in all the time and they even say, well, I could have lived here, and maybe they could, but they don't realize, and that's what docents do, just explain, well, there was no water and there was no bathrooms and but we're glad that it's looking, we've got the house is looking so good, and it's so exciting, all the things that are planned to do.
David, you have anything to add?
Not a lot, other than it's just a show place to help people focus on what was, and hopefully help you appreciate it. It sounds a little bit trite perhaps, but help you to focus on what you have now compared to what folks had back then.
Because this was before the Civil War.
That's right, and again, to give you a perspective on where you are in relation to your fairly immediate past history.
Okay, great point. So there you have it, from 1842 to 2021. In closing, I'll share a quote with you from Richard Moe, a past president of the National Trust for Historic Places. Quote, "There may have been a time when preservation was about saving an old building here or there, but those days are over. Preservation is in the business of saving communities and the values they embody," unquote. A financial gift to our endowment campaign is not only an investment in historic preservation, but an investment in your community. If you feel compelled to invest and join this journey with us, please contact us on our website, historicstanley.org, or message us on our Facebook page. Be sure and like and follow us on our Facebook page so you don't miss any of the exciting cultural events coming up in the near future. Thanks to our panelists today, Janice, David, and Dr. Boone, for your contribution to the society through the years and your dedication to the properties, Janice. So we thank you, and we thank you for watching. Until we can meet again in person, which we hope will be in the third quarter of this year, we can resume our in-person education programs. Until then, stay safe and stay well.